And we're live once again. And we just lost Ben. Great. That's what happens when you have live shows. So we'll see if we can get Ben back in a second. And he's back.
Sorry,
there
back.
we go.
That's my fault.
That's okay. Completely fine. That's what happens when you record it live. It's part of the authenticity of the show.
Right. Yeah.
Well, cool. How have you been? I haven't talked to you in a while, at least on Twitter. Well, I've talked to you on Twitter through GIFs and tweets and stuff. But how have you been?
I mean, pretty good. Not too bad. I'm all locked up here in Texas, but just staying busy, working at Citadel. Citadel's pretty good. I've been working remote now for almost a solid year. It was about a year ago when I left Angular team. And
so is this your first time actually working remote full time? Or I didn't know if you had done work remote before.
No. I worked remote full time for about 2 or 3 years earlier on in my career, doing .NET work of all things. So I had some experience. This is the first time working remote full time with kids in the house and stuff like that, which is a little different.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I was younger and I was married, but we didn't have kids yet. So
cool. And you mentioned you worked at Citadel. I don't know anything about. Only thing I know about Citadel is that I think you and gosh, I forget his name, Jay. I haven't talked to him personally. Y'all, it was redacted at one point, and then.
Oh yeah, so Ken Wheeler's there. He's redacted.
Yeah.
He's not allowed to talk about working there because of his online persona is a little over the top.
Okay.
But we're allowed to talk about him working there. No one made me sign anything. Jay was there for a while. He's left. He's at a startup called I think it's Outsmartly, which does like A/B testing. It's pretty cool. And now it's Ken and I are still there. So Ken's a little bit, I think, better known in the React community than anything. And he's a good guy. He's a fun guy. He's often misunderstood because he's a little rough around the edges, but he's a good guy overall.
I think he's pretty smooth. I follow him for the beats and the he talks about beats and White Claw and stuff like that.
Yeah, he's a really he's a funny guy. He's like a linguistically clever comedian of a guy. That he also does some cool music. He's a really good cook. Like he's a multi-talented dude. He's a good engineer too. But yeah, his not everybody likes his online persona for sure.
I happen to appreciate it. I've probably said this before, but some part of me thinks it's his online persona that he's not like actually like that, but I don't know him personally, so he could be a good mix of both, which is okay.
Yeah. He's got at work. He's very extremely professional, but like outside of work, he's pretty much like that. He is. You get what you pay for with him. Like he's exactly as he portrays himself.
So he's at work. He's like shirt and tie, and then he leaves work like he just tears it off and goes into jersey mode.
Like, rips the sleeves off and yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I would like to. I don't know if he considered coming on or Jay would consider coming on, but I think it'd be fun. I follow Jay. Okay, so let me get right into this question real quick.
Yeah.
Who's the better gift slinger, you or Jay?
Jay is really impressive. Jay's better. Like, cause Jay, like sometimes like him and I go back and forth with like movie quote stuff. Like we there's a lot of like, I don't know. Like I'll text him in the middle of the day, like silly bits of movies that don't make any sense to anybody but him and like probably my wife. And he'll text back with like bits, like an actual GIF of that part of the movie. Sometimes I'm always like, how? You must have a tool that does it, or I don't know, but he's got a much stronger game than I do.
Yeah, he definitely has some original stuff. I think he said he actually, like you said, he has a tool to actually chop up movies and things like that for gifts, which I think is like next level. Because if I'm talking about like people who I know have good meme gift game, it's like you, him, Angel Banks. Who else?
Yeah.
Jorge. He does. It's a few other people that I can't name right now, but always top notch, I would say.
Yeah. Yes, they're important. It's a fundamental part of expression these days.
Right. You can't. If I send tweets with gifs in them that I laugh at before I send them, so I know they're going to be good for the most part.
Right.
And they seem to get a good reaction out of that.
Yeah.
So you say you work at Citadel and you left the Angular team, and you had mentioned this on Twitter about like burnout, and I think a lot of devs have experienced that. So how are you doing with the burnout? Are you still recovering? Are you recovered, or
I feel like I've just recovered. Like, even if you look at like my GitHub history, it's starting to see like full bars of green again, where I'm starting to do a little bit here and there over the last like month or two. But at the point, like right after I left the Angular team, I'd say I was pretty burnt out on open source in general. Like, I'd worked ridiculous hours while I was on the Angular team, like 60 to 80 hours a week for about 3 straight months or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And I was under a lot of pressure there, and there was also some other things, like, there's stuff I wanted to do in RxJS that I had put off for a year to almost 2 years because of just like my time being totally taken up by Ivy or other things, work related. So there's stuff I wanted to do, but by the time I got done with Angular, I was also worried about like, well, if I was kind of told, like, if RxJS moves too fast and you're not at Google, then we might have to fork it. And so I was worried that if I did anything on RxJS, they would end up like forking the library, which would be really bad, I think, for everybody. So those concerns I'm not as concerned, but I spent a lot of time trying to get stuff around, like moving around that to keep them from doing that. And just like having anxiety about even touching it. So
you actually had to, I guess, in addition to working on RxJS, you basically had to maintain it inside of Google to some degree. Well,
I had to on the way out, I organized some folks that work at Google that are into RxJS to say, hey, will you take over the process of trying to sync this? Because it was more than a one-person job. Like, I was tasked with doing it at one point, and like I worked for 2 or 3 weeks just trying to sync RxJS into Google. And the problem is, like, we would fix the typing. I had fixed the typings on pipe, and so people had proper type inference. But now you've got thousands of projects that are like showing actual build errors because they actually have mistakes in them. So you can either go through and fix them, or try to get them to fix them, but you're supposed to go through and fix them yourself. And like, as fast as I would fix them, more people would add more broken files, and then you have to go fix those. And so it was like this constant. And I was criticized for trying to brute force that while I was on the Angular team. And then as it turned out, the only way to get it done happened like as I was leaving. It was done by a group of like 10 people that
basically did the same thing.
Right, because there's no way
you
were
trying to do.
There was no way around it. It had to be brute force. They finally got it in, and now I work with a couple of wonderful folks that are at Google that join the RxJS core team meetings. That they're not on the Angular team; they're just Googlers. That about once a month or so, they'll sync RxJS master into Google 3. And they'll tell me if anything's changed or anything's different or things that might need to be fixed. And we'll work with them to fix things on their end or fix things on our end. So actually, RxJS version 7 beta has been used in like YouTube and stuff like that in production for months and months now. So pretty stable.
Definitely getting hammered there, I would say.
Yeah. So it's good for the RxJS community because it allows, it means that we're pretty sure there's not a lot of breaking changes, or we're pretty sure that things work really well. So the downside is it does cause us to need to move a little slower at times, but yeah. So like all that's in place, but like all of that stuff, and then worrying about, the Angular team wanting to fork RxJS after I left and all this other stuff, like I didn't really touch it for a while. And right now I'm kind of getting back to it. So I've started writing a better guide for RxJS. I've been trying to go through and change, like I didn't write hardly any of the documentation for RxJS. So I've been trying to go through and add.
You mean from the beginning, or?
Yeah, from the beginning. So Andre Staltz wrote a lot of it early on. He was contracted by Netflix to write the documentation. And then of course we'd had a lot of like random contributors over time. And like the documentation hasn't been updated much, even after we had the new doc site that Jan Nicholas put together, which is kind of a fork of the Angular documentation site.
Yeah.
So we like there's just stuff in there where like sometimes the documentation is kind of incorrect, or it just doesn't really explain it well. I added a glossary recently, which I don't think is linked on the in the site yet, but it's in the repository. That's just like, here's a list of terms we always use and their exact meanings. And then the idea is going to be to try to make sure we make all of our documentation uniform, and then try to link back to the glossary at times, so people can understand some of these things a little bit better.
Yeah, so, I really like that idea. I know that the Angular team has like a few dedicated people to writing docs, and I don't know how many contributors there are in RxJS that are more or less technical writers than developers, but I do think a heavy investment in the docs is a good thing, and I'm glad that I know that there have been continual docs on the in the works at RxJS, but I'm glad that you finally got some time to at least hash something out that was something you wanted to do for a long time. Yeah,
so it's what I'm actually trying to do is I'm actually trying to put down RxJS kind of as I would teach it, in such a way that and the PR is still out there, or I can give you the link or something after, but the idea is like each bit of the docs will have like a TLDR at the top about like, here's what this is really about, if you want the given takeaways that you should have. And then underneath it kind of dives into like more detail and the why and, other, bits of explanation that I might try to give if I was talking to somebody in person. And I try to stick to the specific vernacular from the glossary, but also layman's terms. Like I'm going to not mention words like monad, and I never really have, but trying to stay away from confusion. There's always confusion around things like observable, stream, and subscription. Like people use them all to mean kind of the same thing, and I'm trying to kind of disambiguate that a little bit, but it's hard. It's hard because I even do it, right? So
yeah, I think it goes, which we had a separate discussion about the blog post that you wrote about separating the observable from the rest of the parts. But yeah, I can see how that would. I'll probably use them interchangeably still also sometimes. So trying to clear that up, I think would be good.
Right.
So you left the Angular team. You said it's been about a year now. So do you actually get paid to work on RxJS, or does your job allow you to work on RxJS now? Or is that still like a free time thing? Okay.
No.
Okay. Phew, I'm still not the only one. No.
Yeah. It's all volunteer work. It's so funny too. Like it's something where an NPM downloads is a horrible metric, but it does grow steadily, which tells me it's like organic growth of some sort. And it's like it just passed like 20 million downloads. So there's all these people that use it, and there's all these people that are excited about it. And there's people making tons of money off of like selling lessons and classes and all these other things about it. And like,
so what's your take on that? Because like you said, you got tons of people. I checked the stats too. I saw it was like almost 20 million downloads. So all these people everybody's downloading it. Tons of projects are using it. It's open source, free, but at least as the last I checked, there isn't any like funding structure there isn't any funding on the RxJS website. It's like, is that intentional, or is it just kind of that's the way it is right now?
So we had brought it up in the past, and everyone kind of agreed like we had concerns that there would be people that would, well, we had concerns about like, how are we going to manage the money?
Yeah.
And whether or not people would be like, oh, you know, Ben's taking this to do XYZ and not giving it to these other folks, or someone would show up and then do a whole bunch of work that we said that we wanted done, but do it not in a way that we wanted, and then, you know, demand the money or whatever.
Yeah.
And so the thought was, as soon as you get money involved, like there could be problems. I mean, at the same time, like if there was a company that used it a lot and just wanted to push forward on the agenda and they wanted to pay me to come work for them, I'd like, and you know, that's honestly what I thought was going to happen at Google at some point, but it never did, because they use it so much.
You mean they were going to pay for you to work on it? I
mean, I'd be an engineer that worked there, and one of the projects I would end up having to touch a lot would be RxJS. It's kind of what I figured would happen, but that never happened. But, you know, in that case, I would still have to tell people, like, you know, there's a whole community around this. Like, I can't just dictate that, oh, we're going to change, you know, merge map to work this way because my company wants me to, and if I don't, I'm fired. Like, that wouldn't be okay.
That would put you in a difficult spot to have to choose, not necessarily choose between your job and the project, because I'm pretty sure I know which one you pick, but because you can go and get a job anywhere, I would think. But yeah, we've well, maybe that's just me saying it, just because from me looking at you, you've worked at Google and these other places that. Hey, is that an actual phone? I like it. I still have
this. If you want like a junk calls, that's what you own.
Okay, yes, correct. My phone at home is just for junk callers, and in the situation that somehow everybody's cell phone in the house isn't working.
Right.
But yeah, you or talked about like working at Google, and well, I said you could go work at Google, or you worked at Google and you worked at Netflix, and I'm assuming you haven't worked in any other FANG company. Is that how you call it?
Nowhere else.
Okay.
So I had the same time I went to go work at Google, I had an offer to go to work at Facebook on what was at the time the Nuclide team. So that was like their IDE. They used a lot of RxJS on that team. And what's weird is I think Brad Green actually ended up, now he's like a director over in that part of the org. Like, I don't know if it's the same team or not, but yeah, that was a thing at one point, but I chose to go to Google.
Yeah. And you spoke, I guess you spoke about this openly on Twitter, as far as like leaving Google is, you left Google, you talk about like how the prices of living in California are like super high.
Yeah.
And I guess like I've always thought about Google as like a destination. Like you go work at Google, not necessarily that you go work there forever, but usually you see people go to Google and they don't leave for a long time. The cost of living is just like part of the mystique of working for Google and living out in Silicon Valley and all that. But you kind of, at least for me, reading what you talked about on Twitter, you kind of, to me, it was like Google was a hop on a journey and not a destination for you for like a long time thing. You valued having a bigger house and like a bigger yard and less property taxes, for example.
Well, there's a lot of factors. Like Google was indeed like working on the Angular team was like my dream job. That's what I really wanted to do. And whenever we moved out to Silicon Valley, it was Netflix moved me there, and the housing prices were already pretty high. I mean, like not as high. They're probably, if I had to guess, maybe 80% of what they are now, but like they were still already very high. And it was one of those situations where, I'd come from the Midwest. I didn't have the huge pile of money, even though I'd owned houses. Like I didn't have the huge pile of money I would have needed to get into a home there. But I just kind of naively thought, hey, if I work at this long enough, like in 2 or 3 years, I'll have the money for a down payment. And then what ended up happening is we had another kid while we were there. 3 kids, and childcare costs so much. So my wife, I decided to stay home with the kids.
Yeah.
and you're in the situation where you're making money and you're able to save money, but like now you're building up hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that really is just earmarked to make a single huge down payment on a what's really a modest home in the area, and then you're broke again, right? And now you're like gonna have to go paycheck to paycheck to pay these huge
mortgage payments,
and the taxes and everything that are really high. So it was this situation where it was rough, and so like I was saving everything that wasn't my paycheck, like any sort of stock or anything I got from Google or in Netflix, and you know, you get to this point where it's either I buy back into this and go back to going, because I was saving, and in order to save, I was kind of going paycheck to paycheck to do that. Not that bad, not as bad as most people have it, but still, like how do I put it? The expendable income that I was leaving myself was not high at all, and you end up in this situation where you think to yourself, well, either I do this forever, or I cash out and go back to where I came from, which I know is a good place, like somewhere outside of this area, which I didn't come from Texas, but somewhere, in the middle of the country where it's not so expensive. And we just opted for the latter, because the other thing too is you look at my family, the whole time we were there, we lived in a relatively small space. It was an apartment. It was a good sized apartment, but it was 5 people living in there. It was upstairs. Got a downstairs neighbor that would bang on the ceiling because they didn't like my kids running around. And
you can your kids need some elbow room. The kids just want to run around and jump around, and they're going to do what they want to do. And apartments are not the best places to let them stretch out, I would say.
Right. The community we're in had rules, like you had to park your car in the garage. And in order to get my car in the garage, I had to back in this weird way and squeeze out of my car door every day. My commute was only 17 miles, but it took an hour and a half. So I had to get up at 5 a.m. I had so much work to do at Google. I was usually there till 9 p.m. So it was this thing where I was missing my kids growing up, and I was working really hard in an environment that was honestly very stressful for me. And what I was going to have to show for it at the end of the day was a modest house in a lifetime of working paycheck to paycheck. I was just like, I'm out. This is not for me.
So you pulled the Jerry Seinfeld and was like, yep, okay, thanks, but no thanks, I'm out of here.
Take the money and run.
See, I'm just kidding. I was gonna make a bad joke about RxJS and money, but yeah, I think, like I said, you talked about it openly. I thought it was interesting because like I said, some people will just say, well, this is they value, I guess, California life more than more than having a big yard. And like I said, you put a place where your kids can run around and be able to yell without your neighbors getting on you about that.
Right. And I wasn't really getting the California life anyways, because most of the week I was waking up when it was dark,
grinding.
Coming home when it was dark,
at 5:30 in the morning and getting home at 9 o'clock at night. That doesn't leave much time for your kids, let alone RxJS stuff.
Right.
I've had my fair share of working on open source late at night, but still, I think I've at least come to learn that having a better balance is good for everyone. So if you can, I've learned that if I can work more, do more of that open source, I basically fit the open source into the time that I have instead of trying to overdo it. So I think it works out better that way.
Yeah, it definitely works out better that way. So it's a happier existence for sure. I do miss the companies, being a part of something like Netflix or Google is really, Google's cool because they've got all this, infrastructure and these buildings and the cool cafes and all these other stuff that's
you can
fun to go be a part of it.
You can practically live there, right?
Oh,
I mean, they get you get breakfast, lunch, and I'm guessing they serve dinner there also for those people that work late.
gyms and showers. You can do your laundry for free there.
Oh, wow.
There's all sorts of stuff. So yeah, I pretty much, I damn near lived there for at least the last 3 months I was there anyways. And it was too much. It was way too stressful. And then, but I miss that stuff. Yeah, I miss that. And then Netflix was fun. Netflix was the best because when you work for Netflix, everyone's like, "Oh, I love Netflix. I watch that all the time." Like, so everywhere you went, people are really happy to find out that you work for Netflix.
You just get to sit there and watch videos all day, right?
Right, of course. That's what we did. So the work hours there were a lot more reasonable, actually. They were, there's a lot, I would say Netflix that has a slightly older demographic for the engineers that work there. And they tend to be in and out at relatively normal hours. And you're after 5 o'clock, the place was pretty dead, at least when I was there. I don't know if that's changed or not, but I mean, there'd still be people milling around late at night, but yeah, there was the opportunity. Like there's once or twice I had to work on the weekend because it just happens. I come in and my kids want to come with me, and they'd be in there playing with like toys or like watching. I'd set them up in like one of the conference rooms. It's like a huge screen, like watching Netflix.
You give them the special Netflix room, right, for the kids.
Right. That's the thing. Like every room's the special Netflix room. At Netflix,
there you go.
So they have that, and it's the kids like it because there's all sorts of the shows like posters on the walls, and there's like lots of little knickknacks laying around that remind them of Netflix, and so and free snacks, which is always good.
Well, you gotta have snacks. That seems like a staple of all the big tech companies. They want you to spend as much of your life there, so they at least got to give you some snacks to do it.
But now that people are discovering that when they work from home, they also have snacks. They're just not free.
There's too many snacks at home. Like I just sit at home some days and I just eat snacks after snacks. And I'm like, I wouldn't be doing this if I was in an office, but I'm at home and the snacks are there. So I mean, might as well eat them.
The worst time for your waistline is like the 1 week period after you get a Costco order. It's just like, I just got a box of 500 granola bars.
There you go. I should try to eat half of these in a week.
Yeah, right.
Cool. So okay. So would being paid to work, just going back to RxJS, would being paid to work RxJS full time be something that you wanted to do, or is that even if you could work on it full time, you would still want to like build stuff with it?
I'd still want to build stuff with it, for sure. I think that when teams don't actually use the stuff that they're building, it becomes like a weird academic venture, and it doesn't like. You don't end up building things that people need or fixing things that people need fixed. So now that I use RxJS again for work more often, I've found things. Like I have a PR sitting right now to improve the timeout operator because there's a bunch of ways. Like there was one way in which it didn't really work right at all, and it had been sitting like that for 5 years and no one said anything about it.
Yeah, we talked about that. You said you were gonna remove that and see if anybody noticed. And
that wasn't even that. There was a bunch of other stuff. There was like one of the schedulers, I think, just never actually did what people thought that it, which just told me that no one really used it that way, or it was an operator that accepted a scheduler, and when you gave it a scheduler, it didn't do anything right. So.
It was just like, thanks, I'll just pass this along and do nothing with it.
Thanks, I'll just do some nonsense. That was more what it was like. I'm just going to do whatever. It's fine. But yeah, so like, for example, Timeout, what Timeout does right now in the currently released version is if you wait for a certain amount of time, if any given message has a gap of time in it that's too long, it times out. Or if you give it a date, it's supposed to be like if the first value doesn't arrive by that specific date, then timeout. However, what's broken about it is if you give it a date, even if the first value arrives, it still times out at that date. So it doesn't. So no one's clearly been using that because there was no bug reports about it. And then most of the time, people want to do a thing where they're timing out. Like more frequently, I've needed to time out if the first value doesn't arrive by a certain time, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
because you just want to make sure the stream started, and if it didn't, then do something else. And so I have a PR out right now that enables more granular configuration of it. So and provides more information. Like sometimes you'll have multiple different areas that you can time out inside of like a large composed stream of different streaming events.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you're composing two different streams together, but either one of them could time out. And then your error handling down the way, you need to differentiate between which one timed out. And there's not really a good way to do that other than to time out with a specific, like a custom error that you made.
Yeah.
So this allows you to, it gives you more information, like how many values have been seen, what the last value was, and you can thread through some metadata about, wherever it was set up. You can just give it some arbitrary value that gets sent along so you can check it. But yeah, but I wouldn't have thought of that if I wasn't using it, right? Like that.
Mm-hmm.
I would have been like, people would have been like, oh, I need these other features in timeout operator. And like, as a maintainer that doesn't actually use the stuff, I'd be like, oh, you're crazy. You can just do this other thing. And that's probably not how it should work.
Mm-hmm. So you use it, well, you get to use it you use it for work. I'm going to take a guess and say you're doing mostly React these days, using it with React these days?
Yeah, I'm using it mostly with React. So I mean, the usage isn't that different. It's just it's a utility library, so it would work the same in anybody's. I mean, there's no pipe async, that stuff isn't there, but you can make like a custom hook to deal with it or whatever. It's fine. There's maybe a couple more hoops to jump through than there is in Angular, but it's transferable knowledge. If you're really good at that side of your Angular development, and then suddenly you're faced with having to do React development, you'll be okay. Like that side of it is still useful. Okay,
cool. So if I try React, then I could just throw some. Well, I'm not going to throw some RxJS in there, but at least have some footing to land on.
Right.
If that happens.
Yeah.
So do you have an idea of, like, you said RxJS is used at like many different places. Do you have an idea of like the biggest places I guess like YouTube aside, as far as like downloads? Do you have an idea of bigger projects that are using it? Because I guess I don't think there's a page on the RxJS of like, well, okay, let me say that. I guess in that list would be pretty long of companies who use RxJS. Like extremely large projects.
So really big projects, like things that people use all the time, of course, YouTube, Netflix. Although I don't really know that it's still in all of Netflix stack, but I know it's in some of it at the very least. Mm-hmm. There's PlayStation 4 uses it, so it's in their, and they don't like outright advertise that because they're kind of secretive, but it is in their licensing acknowledgements. So it's public knowledge. If you can go find their licensing acknowledgements, but it's for the PlayStation 4, like the main home screen uses it. So it gets used. Slack uses it for their desktop client. OJ Kwan, who's actually on the core team, works for Slack. So there's quite a few people that use it. Microsoft uses it. Facebook was using it for a while. I think they're still using it for like the IDE side of stuff, because
I saw some was it Facebook? Somebody had a hot take on RxJS at Facebook, but I don't even know who that person was. But yeah, there's a timeline.
There's a guy from Netflix that had a hot take that like about it. There's a dude from Facebook that said something about he wished it didn't exist it didn't exist or something like that. He's a React Native guy. So
oh yeah,
it's I was just like, well, I mean, I really honestly like I empathize with him, because I think that what happens is people misuse it, and then the next person inherits the project and they get code and they just and they associate the technology used with the bad code. Yeah. And
you gave me a tool. I've said this before. You gave me a tool. I shot myself in the foot with it, and I'm gonna blame you for
So I responded to him. Yeah, I responded to him with that. Like, I really wish people were misusing it, so people wouldn't have these hot takes. And he did like the quote tweet thing where he quote tweeted and was like I don't know, something about my ego or whatever. I don't even remember what he said, but
Mm-hmm.
and pretty much I have a blanket policy now where anybody that tries to quote tweet me or screenshot me or whatever and tries to drag me, I just instantly block them. I don't even
Mm-hmm.
like, maybe that wasn't his intent, but if someone's trying to get their followers to come after me, I'm just like, block. That's
Yeah.
fine. Move
It's
on with my life.
it's an easy win for you, I would think, because I know you have a large following and people always have takes on RxJS.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't care that people don't like it. That's fine. Like I wouldn't block somebody because it's like art. That's
Mm-hmm.
totally fine. Like there's times where I see projects or people show me projects. Like, look at this cool thing I did with RxJS, and I just look at it and think, you did not need to use RxJS for this. Like,
Hey, look at my cool to-do app. I used RxJS and I have 50 operators.
right. Yeah.
So I can slice and dice to-dos.
Yeah.
It's great. So yeah, I'll ask you one more question and then I'll let you go. But what's your Angular uses RxJS? I don't know if you had an official stance on this before, but where did you lean on the side of Angular should lean more into RxJS, or Angular should lean less on RxJS but provide a mechanism to be able to for developers can integrate it more easily? Like React doesn't directly depend on it, but you can integrate it in with the project. Angular more or less depends on it more heavily, but only to a certain degree. Where did you have a stance on where it should go one way or the other?
So I think that the core parts of Angular probably shouldn't rely on it because it's supposed to be kind of close to the metal and figuring out what needs to render what.
Mm-hmm.
However, since they're using it, like the peripheral parts, like their HTTP and like reactive forms and these other things,
Mm-hmm.
and now I think there's more interfaces in the router. Like I think it's probably the other thing that leads me to say this too is my understanding is that there's a lot of requests for ngComp for more RxJS talks because people really like the reactive programming side of it. And I feel like, maybe Angular uniquely might want to lean into it a little bit more because it seems to be one of the points of attraction to Angular as a framework, as opposed to, React or Vue or some of these other things. It's something that sets them apart, that they kind of have leaned more into that sort of stuff. I mean, the other thing is there's stuff that you need cancellation for. So, having observable or exposing observables as a type in Angular, I think is a decent choice. But like, should they explain to people how to use Angular without it? Probably. I am keen on explaining to people how to use observables without operators, right? So. Yeah, I'm 50-50 on it. Like there's places it belongs and places it doesn't belong. And I think that in the peripheral aspects of Angular, it certainly belongs because of some of the really nice integrations they have with reactive programming. But like in the actual center core piece that I worked on, at least when I was there, it wouldn't have belonged really at all. So.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, I didn't know what your take was, because I know I think at least in the Angular community, there's a sort of a divide of whether Angular is not reactive enough or should be less reactive and be a little less integrated with that. But yeah, I can see how you would want in the core of Angular where like everything is basically they want everything to be written by them and keep it in-house per se.
Right.
I can see how they would maybe not want to have it there, but I do think that Angular, like I said, leaning into RxJS had some benefits because I saw an article and just comparing that to like leaning into TypeScript. Like there was an article that TypeScript didn't take off until Angular like really adopted it. So
right. So all right. So here's the thing. This is a real thing about like one of the differences between React and specifically like React with hooks and Angular. And I've been in both sides of this fence, and I don't know many other people who have, at least not to the degree I've been. And like what I see with hooks, and people got real excited. Hooks came out and they were super excited about hooks, and they're making all these hooks where they can compose hooks together. Now hooks have this thing where, and I don't know if you're familiar, but just for people that are listening, like they have this thing where they've got effects. And effects have like these dependencies you put at the bottom that are just like raw variables that are checked for equality. And if those variables change during a render, it says, oh, I need to execute this callback inside this effect. And then it sets up a new effect, and it also returns like a teardown. So kind of like an observable, really. And so it executes this function, and it returns another function that gets called. The next time that those dependencies change, it calls the teardown from the previous one, and then it executes that the callback again and returns the new teardown. And so people use this to do things like, oh, okay, so whenever I change this value in state, I'm going to pass those to this effect, and then have this effect that debounces, and then I'm going to have another effect that does this other thing. And like effectively, they end up doing this weird reactive programming where they're relying on the render cycle of React to trigger each step of their reactive program. And it works for people, and it's not that it's bad, it just does a lot of extra work involving like the React render cycle that probably doesn't need to be done. Where Angular has had this from the beginning by virtue of the fact that they had RxJS. Like you're able to do reactive programming in steps, and they kind of, proselytize this more. Like here's this library and these tools that you can use to do these things. So the piece of hooks that people were really, really into, this composition of different hooks, like
it's already there with RxJS.
It's already there with RxJS. They could have had it with RxJS to begin with, and still could. And Angular had it. And it was the thing that people were excited about RxJS with, was look at this cool thing I can do, and I can just add in. I add in this one other operator here, and it adds this additional step, and I didn't change any of my other code and these other things. So reactive programming benefits are there.
So what you're saying is you're going to create a hook that's like use RxJS and
yeah. So I'm sure it already exists. Honestly, I've rolled my own a couple times. I'm really close to being like, okay, so here's this one pattern I've used over and over again. I'm going to try to package it up and release it externally. But yeah, because there's like weird tricks in React, like if you want to have a subject and you need to keep the same reference to it, then you have to do like a use ref and put the subject in it, or a use state and put the subject in it, or something like that. And then there's these weird patterns that kind of happen over and over again. If you want a lifetime subscription, you need to use a use effect and create a subscription reference, and like there's just a variety of things that you end up doing with RxJS over and over again. So I might end up finally taking the tools that I've personally built over and over again to deal with RxJS and React, and release those as hooks at some point. But there's certainly nothing built in.
Yeah, something similar to what you did with the like RxJS 408 or something like that. Something small.
Yeah, just something like small. And we'll probably try to direct people to it because there's the obvious benefit of I work on RxJS and I work on this one thing, so we can kind of make sure that they work together all the time. But yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm not gonna hold you on the hook for that. I made a joke there, psych. but yeah, I definitely think that would be a good library to have if you decide to take that on amongst the other mountain of RxJS things that you're doing.
Right.
But yeah, on that note, I think we'll wrap up. I just want to say I appreciate you coming on. I extended the invitation and you accepted, so I'm thankful for that. I see people in the chat room saying I got celebrities on the show now. I guess that's what we're doing.
What? I'm not a celebrity.
No. But yeah, I will invite anyone to come on the show. I just want to put that out there. Anybody wants to come on and talk about Angular and React or whatever else, we'll talk about it.
I like coming on your show. I'll come on your show anytime, man.
Hey, I appreciate that. And you're welcome to come back. But yeah, if y'all want to come on the show, hit me up on Twitter, Brandon T. Roberts. Ben, thank you, and we will see y'all next time.
All right. Thank you.